I thought my neighbor moved out. Now I'm hearing strange noises and noticing a terrible smell, and things are getting weirder by the day. Hey Reddit, I'm in a bit of a weird situation, and I honestly don't know what to do. I've been living in this apartment complex for about 2 years now. It's a pretty quiet place, mostly young professionals and a few retirees. There's this older guy, Mr. Johnson, who lives across the hall from me. He's one of those people who's always polite but never overly chatty. We'd say hi in passing, but that was about it. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, I noticed I hadn't seen him in a while. That's not super unusual, I guess. Maybe he went on vacation or something. But then this weird thing happened. Every night around 9 p.m., I started hearing what sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor in his apartment. It would go on for about 15 minutes, then stop. At first, I figured maybe someone was moving stuff around or renovating. Then, 2 nights ago, I saw his lights on late at night, but there was a shadow in the window that didn't look like him. It wasn't even a person, really. It looked more like a pile of something. It was weird enough that I stopped and stared for a bit, but the shadow didn't move. This is where it gets creepier. Yesterday, I was taking out the trash when I saw a notice on his door from the landlord. It was a standard late payment warning, saying he hadn't paid rent in 3 months. That's when it clicked for me. He's been gone for longer than I thought, but someone is still in his apartment. I decided to call the landlord to see if they knew anything, but they brushed me off, saying they'd look into it. I'm not one to stick my nose where it doesn't belong, but this morning, I noticed a terrible smell coming from his unit. It's not like rotting garbage. It's sweeter, almost sickly. I swear it wasn't there yesterday. The dragging noises are still happening every night. Should I call the cops? Or am I overthinking this? What would you do in my shoes? Let me know, Reddit. I'm genuinely freaked out. Update. First off, thanks for all the advice. After reading your comments, I decided to call the non-emergency police line. I told them about the smell, the noises, and the notice on the door. They agreed to send someone over to do a welfare check. The cops showed up the next day. They knocked a few times, but no one answered. Then they noticed the smell I mentioned and decided to enter the apartment. Here's where it gets weird. They opened the door and found nothing. No Mr. Johnson. No signs of anyone living there. The apartment was spotless, almost like it had been staged for a showing. The smell was still there, though, faint but noticeable. The officers checked every room and even opened closets and cabinets, but there was nothing out of place. I thought maybe I'd imagined the noises, but the officers were serious and took my concerns about the dragging sounds into account. They said they'd make a report and contact the landlord to follow up. They also suggested I let them know if I heard anything else. That night, I was determined to stay awake and figure out where the noises were coming from. Around 9 p.m., right on schedule, I heard the dragging sounds again. I pressed my ear to my door, and it was unmistakable. They were coming from Mr. Johnson's unit. I texted one of my neighbors, Clara, who lives down the hall. She's been here longer than me and knew Mr. Johnson better. She came over, and we decided to investigate together. Armed with a flashlight and way too much nervous energy, we knocked on his door. Obviously, no answer. Then Clara did something I wasn't expecting. She reached up and pulled down the decorative wreath hanging on his door. Behind it, there was a spare key taped to the back. We both stared at it for a moment before Clara said, "If something's really wrong, we need to know, right?" Against my better judgment, I nodded, and we unlocked the door. Inside, it looked just like the cops had described, empty and eerily clean. But the smell was stronger now, like it had been stirred up somehow. We followed it to the bedroom, where we noticed the closet door slightly ajar. Clara opened it, and inside was an old, beat-up suitcase. The smell was overpowering at this point. I wanted to leave, but Clara unzipped the suitcase. That's when we found it. Inside were a bunch of personal belongings, clothes, old photos, and a journal. Nothing alarming at first glance, but Clara recognized one of the photos. It was of Mr. Johnson with a much younger man. She said, "This is his son." He told me they weren't on good terms. We left everything as it was and locked the door behind us. I called the police again to tell them what we found. This time, they sent a detective. The detective confirmed the belongings belonged to Mr. Johnson, But here's the twist. According to the landlord, the apartment had officially been vacant for 4 months. Mr. Johnson's son had taken over his affairs after he moved out, but no one could say where he went. The noises? The detective said there were no signs of anyone accessing the apartment, and the landlord swore no one else had a key. They're running a deeper investigation now, but the dragging sound stopped after that night. I haven't heard anything else from the police yet, but Clara and I are both keeping our doors locked and staying alert. I don't know what happened to Mr. Johnson, but something doesn't add up. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. I'll post another update if anything new comes up. But for now, I think I'm going to start looking for a new place. This is too much for me.